Hello, and welcome to my business office. I'm not saying I'm a lunatic, and neither are you. All I'm saying is that I wanted to make another Resonite video. I'm not comfortable enough using Resonite, my head is very gentle and fragile, and I know that it would boil me if I tried, even though I've made some excellent progress. So I wanted to make a Resonite video. I can't use Resonite yet without getting a boiled head, so I'm making a Resonite video without using Resonite. Please forgive me. I'm turning the camera around to the whiteboard. What a fantastic whiteboard it is. This is your inspector window. This hurts me more than it hurts you. Okay, so over here. So one of the primary things that really bothers me with Resonite is all of the tutorials want to skip into the actions that you can take to set up a snapper or to put on your skin and the different texture files onto your avatar to get that set up, and then bone structure and the steps you have to take in order to achieve things in Resonite. And what would have helped me a lot is having a primer before getting into Resonite about how Resonite works a little bit, because when I'm following along with all these tutorials, it's decent having a step-by-step how to set up a snapper grid. It would make more sense to me if I had a knowledge of why I'm doing the actions that I am. And I never looked at tutorials about this is like what the inspector window was. Okay, that's not true. I did eventually, but they didn't really stick because they weren't done in my way. So I'm doing it my way, which is not even using the program Resonite itself. But I wanted to get this video out, so I'm not holding myself back from it. Anyway, here we go. Every single one of these lines here is going to be an element inside of your inspector window. And a lot of the times you would like, if this was a laser pointer in Resonite, and right now it's just a laser pointer in VRChat, you could open up your inspector on this laser pointer, and it would show up with something kind of like this. Laser pointer would be the first item on the inspector window, and then everything underneath that would be pieces of this laser. Now, to the best of my understanding, any one of these pieces down here is called an object, I think. Objects, stop. Objects on their own don't necessarily, or I think actually on their own, they don't have anything. They don't do anything. They're just placeholders. You'll hear empty object thrown around in a lot of Resonite tutorials. And to me, that's really confusing because a laser pointer, that's an object. And just like something that's nothing, to me, is not an object. In Resonite, something that's nothing is still an object. Stop. That's just one of the things I had a hard time, and still kind of do have a hard time grasping with Resonite, is an empty object is still an object within the programming language of Resonite. That's something that you're going to have to get used to. And when you say spawn an object on its own, that doesn't mean a damned thing. It's empty. Enter components, which is telling Resonite what you want that object to do. On its own, an object does nothing. When you spawn an object, it does nothing. You add components to get your objects, which start empty, to start doing things. Take this laser pointer, for example. It's probably going to have several different components if this was a Resonite laser, or several different objects, sorry. And that's going to be called children when an object has objects underneath it, children objects. One of those objects will probably be something like the shape of the laser pointer. Clearly, you would think clearly. And so you would add a component that's like, I'm sure there's lists and names of components, and there's so many components in Resonite, and that's really confusing. And you would add a component called, like, if I was in Resonite and I knew how to use Resonite, I would say what it's called, but I don't know what it is. But you would add a shape, like a cube, which, if I'm not mistaken, starts as an empty object like anything else would. But then you have like a texture, or there's some sort of a component that has dimensions that says this component is actually going to have walls, and are the walls going to be things that you interact with, or are they going to be things that you can pass through? And you would make an empty logic, attach this is a physical shape component to it, and then that's when you get to make the shape of the laser pointer. And then a different object would be the laser effect, because you can bundle code into an empty object as well. So the code, when you press the button, probably what it would look like, and there's ways to do this in Resonite because Resonite's very powerful. So how I would solve this is there's a shape of this, like there's a line of the laser pointer. And so you would just get what this line is and extend it all the way out into infinity. And so when you're holding the laser pointer and you press the action button, it knows where a red line is going to go. And so just keep drawing a red line unto infinity. And there you go. I've made a laser pointer in Resonite. All of the code for that action of determining where the laser has to go and press the button to spawn the laser, that would all go into an empty object that I would then pack all of the code into. So when I was ready to take a look at the code, I would click and open the inspector window, focus only on my laser pointer so I can see all of the pieces of the laser pointer. One of the things in the inspector window will be an object, which again started as an empty object. I added the component box mesh to it, or whatever it's called. So one of the objects of the laser pointer is going to be the shape of it. One of the other objects would be literally just the code to pull off the laser. And that's basically the setup for how the inspector window, how the hierarchy goes within Resonite. Because understanding the hierarchy of things was very important for me to start understanding more about what's happening within Resonite, how things are working. And I'd never had the hierarchy explained to me through the tutorials I was looking at as a novice. And when I did look up those tutorials, they didn't work as well for me as I would have liked them to. So this is a primer. If it was a tutorial, it would happen within Resonite. So it's just a primer, I guess, on how the hierarchy works within Resonite and what add component really means. You're going to hear a lot about add component for snap or tool, and then you have to, one is a snap receiving tool, stuff like that. And if you follow those guides, you'll be like, okay, adding components left and right, but I never knew what that meant. And when you add a component, you are choosing one of a million bazillion ways to customize what once was an empty object to tell Resonite what that once empty object is going to do. That's what add component means. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the avatar creation system. I'm skipping ahead to the step that has less interest to someone who's just starting out, which to me was how to get the avatar set up, get it into Unity. How do I get my texture files on? How do I exist? I am such a beautiful, bouncing little baby boy, and I want to exist. And so that was the only thing I really cared about. We're not doing that just yet. We're skipping ahead to one tutorial didn't really bring it up a ton, but the other one did, and it was the last step. And that's the step that we're going with today, because that's going to help illustrate more about the component system. Because the last step, or one of them, for setting up your avatar in Resonite is setting up the bone structure so that your hair does the thing and that your tail does the thing. Tail, move, tail, all right, whatever. But my tail moves, and in Resonite, your tail also can move, and you would have to add the component that's like fizz bone or something like that. The tutorials will tell you what the component is, but on its own, that information doesn't make it into Resonite when you import your model. You have to tell Resonite, these are things I would like to set up. So you have to go to the root of your avatar, similar to how you would go to the root of the laser pointer that we were just talking about. You would select your avatar, and there's a button up here that I think it's here. Give me a sec. If I'm not mistaken, this button, imagine there's a square around the button. It looks kind of like this, and that says, because the inspector is going to have tons and tons of garbage all over the place. And if you click on one piece of the thing, then you've got tons and tons and tons of garbage all over the place, and you've highlighted only one piece inside of your entire massive inspector window that has tons of garbage all over the place. If you click the button that looks a little bit like this, then it's going to focus the inspector only onto the one thing you've highlighted, so you can focus and just only look at your laser pointer or your model in this case. So you would select your model and press a button like this to focus the inspector and only see your model, which again is an object that was once empty, and it's got lots of different objects inside of it, which again once were empty. And these are all ways that Resonite eventually knows, oh hey, this is what Phineas Former looks like. So the tutorials for setting up your avatar at one point will tell you to navigate to a certain point within your avatar hierarchy, and it will ask you to add component to whichever particular empty object it's going, not empty, once empty object inside of your inspector window that we're going to add components to. I don't know which one this is. This isn't a tutorial video, this is a primer video done badly. And it's important to know that whenever you add a component, all you're really doing is adding functionality to an existing object. So you'll be navigating to, I think it's the part of the model that has, I think it might be called armature or something like that. And a component exists that's some sort of bone structure, something. And there's guides that say import from children, and the way a lot of models work is your tail actually has something like 7 bones in it. And that's how you get one part of it moves and the other part of it moves, and that's how it gets nice and fluidy, is you got lots of different bones go into your tail. So you add a component that says, I want to add bones, and there's an option inside of there that says auto-populate the bones. That's just one of the ways to customize your avatar that you're going to have to go through. People will tell you about that step. That's what's happening when it says add component, is you are just adding functionality to an object within Resonite. Once again, everything in your silly hierarchy, your complicated Resonite hierarchy, every line of text when you like expand a box and it has lots of things, those are all objects. Add component is how you edit functionality and let an object which was once empty, as all objects begin, you're going to add functionality, and that's what add component does. Components are functionalities you are adding onto objects. Now I'm going to say something that might make the Resonite heads upset. So no one tell the Resonite heads what I'm about to say. They might get upset. You might be able to think of the hierarchy system as like a file structure. Because what I have seen in my preliminary investigations, this actually happens, and I think that's actually even just honest-to-God good practice. You have your laser pointer, right? When you focus the laser pointer on the hierarchy using that weird button with the 2 arrows that I used to have here, and I took that away, then the object at the top, which would be called the parent, or the root, that would be the root. So the very first thing is what would be named laser pointer. Fun fact. It's possible that laser pointer itself, when you go to what that object is, which again, a once empty object that you add components to customize, it's possible that the literal object in the hierarchy window is empty. It's possible that the very topmost parent of the laser pointer, which is titled laser pointer, on its own doesn't do a damned thing. Because you need the object to have children pieces, which will work together, all of which are going to become the laser pointer. In this instance, having the top root of an object called laser pointer, but with no components attached at all, only serves as a file structure because the object called laser pointer has nothing, it does nothing. It's just a collection where I'm putting all of the other pieces, the other objects that make up the laser pointer. Not everything in the hierarchy has code or components. Not everything does something. Some things are only used to categorize other things. To help keep the laser pointer nice and tidy, it all goes together under the laser pointer umbrella. That laser pointer umbrella is an object, like all things in Resonite are, like all things in your inspector are, and the laser pointer object on its own possibly would not do anything if you just looked at the hierarchy because the object in the hierarchy, which is called laser pointer, might not have any components attached specifically to it. It would have children components, that is the box mesh and the texture and the code and the whatever. But those are all components that would go onto children, not onto the parent, and it's pretty frequent, I think, that you would have that setup. A laser pointer might be called laser pointer on the root, and that's the only thing the root does, is hold children and call laser pointer. That's it. Possibly. Now, I was just about to start saying more about object references, and then I stopped because I don't know what I'm talking about, and I can give an overview, explained poorly, from a man who doesn't know what he's talking about, but this I kind of understand, I think, maybe. And a lot of reference IDs and other ways the program works, I'm going to have to wait until I know more about the program to actually go in and explain more about it. So I'll just make another couple notes about importing your avatar into Resonite, which is still primer information that I would have gotten a lot of use out of had this video existed when I was looking for this video. You will be dragging something called FBX into Resonite. It's really important to know right now that I don't think anybody knows what FBX stands for, and I don't think anyone knows what an FBX file is. I think everyone's just making it up all the time, but you're going to hear the word FBX a lot. And what comes to make sense to me eventually is FBX is not only your avatar, but FBX is all of the information needed to make your avatar. Any FBX that I know of is going to have something called armature. Armature, you open that up and you have like head and bones or whatever. And when you follow down all of this file tree system or whatever, then you find out that like, oh, it's got bones, this is the shape of it, and FBX is a collection of all of that avatar information. That I didn't know. No one told me that. Everyone just said, FBX file, import the FBX file, open the inspector, go to this thing. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? When you import an FBX file into Resonite, what you're really doing is not only importing your avatar, you are importing avatar information. I think that an avatar looks like this. So when you import an FBX, it looks like you're importing your avatar, but you can't use it yet, and it's not complete yet, because you might have to drag different textures onto it still. You might have to attach components to it. And I don't know who needs to receive this video, but to me, it helps to think of FBX not as my avatar. FBX is avatar information. What happens when you import FBX into Resonite is it scrolls through all of the avatar information and puts it in your inspector. To me, that illustrates what a powerful tool Resonite really is, that it can crawl through an FBX avatar information format and spit it out into Resonite one-to-one. That's super duper cool. Good job, Resonite developers. I'm sure that wasn't easy to do. Well done. And one of the steps you're likely going to have to do when you are working on setting up your avatar in Resonite is deal with texture files, which for a little bit was something that boiled my brain. We're going to go through that real quick as a primer so that you can understand what you're doing as you follow someone else's tutorial who actually shows you how to do it, because to me, knowing why you're doing stuff helps a tremendous amount. A texture file often has 4 pieces to it. 4. There's 2 words for the first one. It's called albedo in Resonite, and other places, I think it might be called mesh texture or something. I don't know. There's 2 names for it, but that's your primary texture, what your avatar looks like, and that's going to be the normal ass looking texture file, because that's the normal ass one. There's a different file type called normal. You know what? I don't want the laser pointer. I want my actual hands right now. One of the files you'll be working with is going to be called a normal. Nobody knows what that means. One of the ones you'll be working with is called metallic, which is how shiny something is. If light hits it, is this all the way metallic and does the light shoot back, or is it not all the way metallic, even a little bit, and it just kind of treats light normal? How reflective is something? That's your metallic map. Also, you will be having a roughness map, or sometimes it's called smoothness map. I have seen it called smoothness. In Unity, I have seen it called roughness inverted. You would have an invert check mark, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Resonite wants smooth. I only have rough. I have an inverted rough, which is smooth. Keep an eye out because big roughness wants to keep you down. Don't let it. So roughness and smoothness, they're the same thing. It's just how inverted it is. Now, I don't know what roughness and smoothness means for a model. I don't think anybody does. That's just one of the things you'll be working with. So when you reach this stage of importing your model into Resonite, it's going to tell you to drag a bunch of files into Resonite. Quick note, they're going to call it texture files. To me, that fucks me up because texture, to me, is the albedo, the first one, the main one, the texture file that matters. It's important for video games to have every single one of the textures because what's happening is these are all fancy tricks to get the computer to render it in a way that looks really nice, even though you only have 4 texture files. So everyone calls all of these different types, these 4 types, textures, because they're texture files. To me, that's confusing because I think texture is just me, what I look like. But there's other pieces that the computer needs, and so even the weird-ass metallic, normal roughness maps, those are also still really useful texture files, even though they suck compared to the main one, which is called albedo sometimes, and there's another name for it too. I just don't remember what that is. So because there are textures on our avatar model, and a texture has 4 pieces to it, it's going to say to highlight your model and maybe press the fancy button that makes you focus only on the model, navigate to some part of the model, and then you're going to see tons of existing components. Again, because Resonite is very smart and knew what all of your model information was when you dragged in the FBX. One of these existing components is going to be texture, mesh, render, something. It has a name, I don't know what it is, but it's going to be there, and that's very nice that they set you up already to have that ready to go for you to customize your avatar onto. You're going to scroll around and see empty little places, or they might have populated information already, and you're going to need to customize that based on what type of model you're importing and where you're importing it from, stuff like that. And they're all going to be named, and so you would just have to drag and drop the albedo to albedo, metallic to metallic. You would do that 4 times, and then you would save your avatar, and then you would celebrate because you're done with one part of the process, and you still have like 7,000 to go before your model is set up in Resonite. This has been the primer on Resonite. I don't know what I'm talking about, as evidenced by I did not film this inside of Resonite. Resonite scares me because there's so much to learn. This was all explained very badly. I probably got some of it wrong. Maybe I got all of it wrong. And, I mean, yeah, that's how Resonite this works. That's your inspector window. That's objects in a nutshell. That's what texture files are and why there's so many of them. And no one knows what FBX stands for. And that is what this video is. It was a primer explaining poorly Resonite as presented outside of Resonite. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed.